Hi everyone. Last class we were talking about triggers. We started using the trigger context variables. We have seen that Trigger.New gives us the new set of data, and also we have seen with the one example. So basically, whenever the new records or whenever the data is inserted before storing into the database, if we wanted to get the data, then we use the Trigger.New. That means Trigger.New gets the data from either A or from the buffer memory, right? And then it will pass it to the trigger. So that is what we did. I was creating the book and where the book and price. Whenever the record is clicked on save button, we used to calculate the discount amount 10%, and based on that, we used to update the data in the database. Now today we will see new example with the new map. New map. So what is the new map? New map returns the map of ID, comma S object data of all the new records that are created, right? So whatever the new records are there. It will give all the records which are created, including the ID, comma S object. Whenever I say map, map will have two values. Collection map will have two values, right? One is ID. So in this case, new map will have the ID, which is as object ID, and the value. The second one is value. Map will have the value. So value is S object data. So map of ID, comma S object data. So value will be the S object. Now let's see how to use the new map with the one of the scenario. Let's say business scenario is I have an employee table. I have an employee table. So whenever the user created, immediately I wanted to create a employee record. So business scenario. Create a employee record automatically whenever a new user is created in the system. Whenever new user is created in the system, I wanted to create a new record for that user in the employee table. Right? So let me go to the Salesforce. Do I have an employee table? Let me see. Employee table I do not have. So let's go ahead and create one employee table setup. Let's create a new object manager. Create custom object. What is our object name is employee. And the plural label is employees. Right? Object name, record name, that should be fine. And the data type is text. Allow for the report activity, trace the field, allow the chart. And I wanted to launch it, allow for search. And let's click on a save. So it is asking me to choose the style. So let's go ahead and choose the style. Let's use the employee table headset. Next, default on for everybody. Save it. So now my object got created. Object name is employee underscore underscore C. Now let me go ahead and create a couple of fields. Assume that I have a 4 fields: first name, last name, phone number, email. So whenever I'm creating the employee table automatically, I'm going to capture the first name, last name, phone number, email from the user record. Right? So I need a 4 tables. So data type will be the text. Next, employee first name. Okay, length, let's give it 100. Next. And click on next. By default, it is going to add it to the layout. And another field is I need employee last name. Let's create another field. Okay, let's give the length as 100. Click on next. Next, let's save and new. The another one I need is phone number. So let's choose the data type as phone. So this is employee phone. Perfect. Let's click on next. Next. And again, new one, last one which I needed is email. So let's choose the data type email. Employee email. So let's click on next. Next. And save. So I have a 4 fields: employee first name, last name, phone number, and email. Right? So whenever a new user is created in the system, or whenever the admin creates a user in the Salesforce, I want a new record. It should be created in the employee table by capturing the first name, last name, phone number, and email address from user record. So right now I do not have anything. Right? Now, how can I create a user? Let's go to the setup. Here we have a user field. Now let's click on the users. Now let's click on new user. Now, so as soon as I save this, the same name has to be created in the employee table. So let's go with the trigger. Where to implement the trigger? I have to create it on the user level, not on the employee table, because as soon as the user click on the save on the user, I wanted to create a employee related employee record. So the trigger has to be on the user. So let me go ahead and create a one example. Let's close all of this. File new, we are creating the trigger, Apex trigger. So tr_0707 underscore. We are creating user to employee. And which object we are creating? User object. We have a user object. Yes. So let's click on your submit. So by default, the structure is created. Now, which event should I need to go? Should I go to the before insert or after the insert? So my requirement is as soon as a user is created, I wanted to create a employee. So once the data is saved into the database, if the user record is successfully saved into the database, then only I wanted to create a employee table. So definitely it will be after insert. If I take a before insert, what will happen? Sometimes what happens is user record not yet saved into the database, but now I'm creating the employee table. So what will happen? User record will not be there. User record will not be there, but employee record will have the information. So those kind of a scenarios, it will be problem. So always go with the after insert. After insert, once the data is saved into the database, then only create the employee record, that particular related user. Now, in order to create it, like what do we need? Latest record, right? What are the latest information is created by user? That information I need it. So I need to store it in list of user u equal to, who is going to give me? Definitely Trigger.New is going to give me the data. But what is the difference between the Trigger.New and Trigger.NewMap? So Trigger.New, if I take a Trigger.New, what will happen? It is going to give me the entire information of the user. When I say entire information is when I give the Trigger.New. Trigger.New will have the first name, last name, alias, email, username, nickname, whatever the fields, it has the user level. If there are 100 fields, 100 API fields are there. So Trigger.New is going to give us the 100 fields. That means Trigger.New is complete details. It is going to give the complete details or complete field information. Could be 100 fields or what are the fields I have, it is going to give everything. But what I actually need is, I just need a 4 fields. User first name, user last name, phone number, email. I just need a 4 fields. I do not need all the information what is there in that. So basically, if I open the paint, let me open the paint. So here we have a user details and this is the employee. Let's assume this is the employee. User table and this is the employee table. Employee table. And on the user table, how many fields I have? Like field 1, total, field 100 fields are there. There are so many fields on the user level up to the field 100. Right? Now, when it comes to the employee table, what are the data that I required? Only the 4 fields. Field 1, field 2, field 3, and field 4. So now in order to create the employee record, I just need these 4 details. I just need these 4 details. So why do I waste pulling up everything? Why do I waste pulling up all the fields? And I'm saying here, once this data is stored into the database, then I wanted to create an employee table. So what will happen here? Trigger.New will usually we use the Trigger.New with the before insert, or this is the specific one. Before insert we use it. We can use with the before update, after update, whatever is fine. But when we are using with the before insert Trigger.New, I'll not be having the ID here because the data is still in the air or still in the buffer memory. I'll not be having the data. Now Trigger.New, what it is going to give me for one object, if there are 100 fields are there, it is going to give me the 100 fields, it is going to collect it. And for example, I'm doing the data loader for 1000 records. For all 1000 records, each one of them, it has to be collected the 100 fields. So I do not want to do all of this. Like it is going to be the right. Yeah. So it is going to be a lot of information is going to collect it, right? But instead of this, using the Trigger.New, because right now what is my purpose is, I just wanted to get the ID. Okay, and I'll pass that ID to the another class wherever the employee table is created. And from that, I can fetch only the 4 fields. From ID, I can fetch only the 4 fields that are required for me. So in that case, what will happen? So instead of using the trigger.new, if I'm looking for the ID, then we can go with the map of ID comma user. User map equal to trigger.NewMap. Trigger.NewMap, which is going to give me the ID comma user. So when I write a trigger.new or new map, it doesn't mean that it is going to hold the one record. By default, the trigger is going to hold the multiple record information. So by default, trigger is the bulkified. Right? So from trigger.NewMap, I'm collecting the ID comma user. So from the user map, I just need the ID. So I can use the set of ID. So I can say user ID equal to, how can I get the ID information from the map? userMap dot, we have something called keySet. KeySet is going to give me the all the IDs of what are the newly created record. What are the newly created records are there? Everything will be collected in the KeySet and that will be assigned to the user ID. So now I got the user details. Now let me go ahead and create Apex class CL underscore this helper. So inside this, let me create a static method, public static void. What I'm doing, creating the employee details. So create employee. Now what are the details that I need in order to create an employee? I just need the ID list. Based on the ID, I can query what are the data that I need. Only those 4 fields I can query it and get the information. So user ID. Perfect. Now let's save this and call this method from the trigger. So when I call this method from the trigger, I can directly call it because it's a static method. And what are the data that is required? It's required the set of ID, which is a user ID information. Now let's go ahead and write the actual logic here. So once I have the data, what I can do, I can query the user. These all are new users equal to select ID comma first name comma last name comma email comma phone number. That's it. That's all I needed from the user, where ID is user ID. Now I got all the information. Now what I can do, I can loop through this. I can loop through the new list, whatever we have the new list. And inside for loop, let's initialize the employee. This is a one employee record. I'm initializing it. Employee underscore C EMP equal to new employee. Okay, so what are the data that I needed from the user? Employee dot, I need email equal to EU dot email. EMP dot first name equal to EU dot the first name. EMP dot first name over last name equal to EU dot last name. What is the EU here? I gave the name in the for loop, which is a user reference. EU is nothing but employee user details. So EMP dot phone number equal to EU dot phone. So that's all I needed. That's all I need the information. Right. Also, we have one more field. We have one more field which is called as a name. So whenever we are creating the object, whenever we created the object by default, there is a one field which is created as name. So this is mandatory. So I need to give that name, so which is emp dot name equal to. So basically this is combination of first name comma last name. So first name plus, let's give the space, and last name. Now, these are the records I have assigned. What are the values that is required? I have assigned it. Now next thing is that I have to insert. So in order to insert this, let's create a collection first. List of employee, create new employee equal to new list of employee. Perfect. And everything push it into the list. Whatever the records are created within the loop, everything push it into the collection list. EMP. And then once we are done with collecting all the information, cross verify whether my list has the information or not. If dot, whether it is size is greater than 0 or if it is not equal to empty, anything we can do that. So once it is size equal to greater than 0, what we can do is simply we can insert employee list. Perfect. So this is the logic that we have written. Okay, let's say okay. Now we have written the trigger on user. On the user, as soon as the data is saved into the database, then I'll collect the latest information using the new map, because only the difference between the new and new map is basically new map is it's an extension for new. So using the new map, you will have an additional flexibility where you can capture the ID. Okay, ID will be there if you are looking for only ID, not interested in all the fields, then we can go with the Trigger.NewMap and get the ID. And from that ID, whether we need 2 fields or 3 fields or 4 fields, if you have very less information that is required, we can query it by passing the ID and pass those information in order to create the record. So let's go ahead and create one record. Let's say Kapil, last name there. Okay, let's give the some name. What is the name we can give? Let's give no email @email.com. Right, so this is created. Do I have a Salesforce system admin? Yes. So let's go ahead and let's save it. Okay, duplicate username. No email is already there. Perfect. So let me create one. Just a second. Okay. There is some random email that got generated, so I can use that. So this is a dev. So dot dev. I can give the dot dev. Should be fine. Perfect. So the user has created it. Now let me go back to the employee table. Let's refresh it. Click on all. Nothing has been created. Why? So yeah, there is a one created. Couple, right? It created the Kapil Dev. The reason why I did not pick the phone number and email address it picked, but the phone number it did not pick, because while inserting, I did not mention the phone number. So let me create a new one. New, so Rohit Kapoor. Okay, so let's keep the @email.com. Perfect. Do I have a Salesforce? I cannot create a Salesforce anymore, so I'll create a charter-free user. Let's give the phone number 9909. So 3. Generate a password. Let's remove it. Click on save. Now it should create a new record. Let's refresh. All the records, and let's click on Rohit Kapoor. So now if you see the information, all the informations are available, right? So that is the logic that we have written. So that is a business case. Again, what is the difference between the new and new map? They might ask you that. So they might ask you the interview question, like when to use Trigger.New and Trigger.NewMap. When to use Trigger and Trigger.New and Trigger.NewMap. So the simple way to explain them is we have to use the Trigger.New when we want to iterate over the list, when we wanted to iterate over the list, and especially if the records have not committed to the database. And if you want to iterate to the all the fields of list and which do not have the ID, that means it is not committed to the database, means that will not have the ID. So in those scenarios, if I wanted to capture the new information, we can use the Trigger.New. And we mostly use it in the before insert, before and after both we will use it, both the events we will use it. And coming to the Trigger.NewMap is when you have a specific use case where you need to get a specific record, like you have a some requirement where you need to get specific record information or within the record specific field information based on the ID. Then we have to go with the Trigger.NewMap. And moreover, Trigger.NewMap extends on the Trigger.New, where it contains the same record, but only the difference is Trigger.New will contain the information list. Trigger.NewMap will contain the information along with the ID in the map, right? So those are the scenarios. So this ID, you cannot get it from the Trigger.New because that is not yet saved into the database. So you will not have the information there. Clear? Anybody has any other question? Any questions? Okay, somebody asked a question yesterday regarding the Trigger.old. Can I save the data in the Trigger.old? Anybody got the answer for that? Can we do the save on the Trigger.New? Anybody did the research on that? So any information like on that, anybody has? If you know the answer, please let me know. Can we do the same on the trigger.old? Nobody is aware of it. Okay, let's assume that I have a form. Okay, that could be a page layout or that could be a visual force page, whatever it might be. So I assume that there is a form. Okay, so this form will have the three fields which are called as name, phone number, and email. Let's assume that user is entering the name here. Let's say Padbury. Okay, phone number 111. In the email ID, some email ID they have mentioned. Let's say p_email.com. p_email.com. So now what is happening is, as soon as I click on a save button, we have a save button here. As soon as I click on a save button, what it does, if there is, assume that there is a trigger on, what are the object it is referring to. Okay, so what it does, it simply goes to the database. It simply goes to the database. And while going, in case if I have a logic which says that before insert, in case if I have a logic which says that before insert, what it will do, before committing to the database, first it will go here, right? First it will go here and cross verify the all the information is perfect or not. Then it will insert into the database. Now, once it is insert into the database, let's assume that there is some logic which we have written where phone number, whenever the one-on-one is entered, okay, whenever the one-on-one is entered, update the phone number with 999. Perfect. And whenever the email is says that @email.com, whatever the name before that, that doesn't matter. But after if that is contains email.com, then update the information with p@gmail.com. Okay, this is the change which we have did it in the before insert. So when it was inserting here, what it happened? It happened the data is stored in Padbury. And it stored the 999 p@gmail.com. This is fine. Okay, we understood this. Now let's assume that on the update, this data is already saved in the database. On the update, what I did is, again, I have updated from 99 to 222. This is on update, I'm doing it. On update, I'm doing the 222, I'm updating it. And this whatever the email ID is there, which is incorrect, so I'll update it to something else like sam@gmail.com. So on update, whenever I do, what will happen? So here, if I'm calling the, as soon as I click on save or update button, what will happen? The latest information contained, where it will contain the latest information. Latest information will be with Trigger.New and Trigger.NewMap. Trigger.New and Trigger.map will hold the 2222 sam@gmail.com, right? Now, while saving this, like we have a logic called before update. We have a logic called before update. So when we have a logic on the before update, trigger.new will contain the 222, trigger.NewMap will contain the what are the sum@gmail.com. But we have a something called trigger.old, right? Trigger.old, which is a trigger.old and trigger.oldMap. What is the value that is contained in the trigger.old and old map? The values will be 999 and p@gmail.com. Trigger.old and old map will have the 9999 and p@gmail.com. When it comes to trigger.new and new map, what is the value it will contain? It will contain the 222 and sum@gmail.com. Now, this is overall structure. Whenever we do the update, either using the trigger.new or new map, I always have in my hand using this trigger.new, latest information will be there. When I use the trigger.old and trigger.old map, it always contains the before the data update, whatever the data it was there in the database, it contains the old information. And if I try to update this information, like yesterday's question, if I try to update this 999 to some 1000, and if I click on save, what will happen? Again, I'm overwriting, which is a completely wrong thinking. Completely, that is a, I cannot say, I mean, that is not the right way to do. That is not the right way to do, because you are updating on the old record, which does not make any sense. Whether we can save it or update, that is the another part. But why are we doing on the update, or why are we doing save on the old and old map? Those are the already old, which no more there in the database, because there is already one more value is replaced with the old value. Right? Never ever think in that direction. Can I update or can I save the old? So never think on that. That is a complete wrong direction of thinking on that. Because ultimately you will be having the very old data. So what data will you update on the old? If you update it also, the old data will be the wrong. And why do we use the trigger.old, trigger.map? The purpose of trigger.old and trigger.old map is to compare the data. To compare the data. For example, let's say that there is a scenario which says that whenever the record has the previous email is no@email, then only go ahead and update the latest information. Then only go ahead and update the email with a new email. With new email data. Right, this is. But in case if there is already data on the email, let's say that sum@gmail.com. If it is a sum@gmail.com, then do not update, do not allow the user to update anything. If the value is sum@gmail.com or anything apart from the no@email.com, do not allow the user to edit the email. Only allow them to edit the record or edit that particular field when the value is, before value is no@email.com. So in this scenario, we have to compare the old data and new data. So you have to get the new map and old map. So check what was my old value. Old map of email equal to no@email.com. Was it before no@email.com? If so, go ahead and update it. If it is the old value is different, and also comparing the user is really modified the email or did he modify the name or phone number, anything else. So only work my logic if the value is different between the old and new. So just for comparison purpose, comparing the values, comparing the field values, we use the trigger.old and trigger.old map. So old map is specifically for the comparing the data with the new information. So clear on that. So coming to the assignment, if account, so we have a account, on the account we have a address, right? Postal address is there. Whenever a user is updating the address on the account, then automatically update the contact address. We have a address in the contact. We have to update the address in the contact as well. If you do not see the address field in the contact, create a address fields in the contact. And whenever the user is updating the address on account, then we have to automatically update the contact. Just a second. Okay, so that is the assignment. And coming to the trial head, we have a basic Apex trigger is there. Okay, so do this Apex trigger. This is the basic one. Complete this today. Fine. So we have a few more sessions on the trigger, so do not worry. We will cover everything. Okay. So any questions? Whatever we spoke on the Trigger.New and new map. Okay then. Thank you. We'll meet tomorrow.